Well, welcome. I get to tell some stories myself tonight. I am an engineer. I'm absolutely fascinated and greatly impressed by the sheer magnificence of the biological world, an incredibly fun place to explore because nature's constructed really a phenomenal collection of interesting solutions to one problem, and that's the problem of being alive. And all these different forms of being alive that nature has assembled for our viewing pleasure it's just a tremendously diverse place to explore and get new ideas. Life in different environments is predicated on also what happens at the level of individual molecules. These things have to explore the solutions to a wide array of functions, not just the function of life, but for example, how do you extract energy from the environment? How do you utilize atoms and reassemble them to make new cells? How do you carry things back and forth on their shoulders along these filaments so that you can move things from one piece of the cell to another? This is not alive. This molecule, this animation, this doesn't represent something that's alive. It's simply a molecular machine programmed to do what it does, to carry these burdens on its shoulders back and forth. And what nature has done to create something that is alive is make thousands of these different molecular machines that do all these different things that allow a cell to reproduce. Surely nature has to be the very best engineer that there is. And I have been lucky in my career to spend the last 25 years studying how nature solves problems and then figuring out how I might be able to use some of those lessons to solve new problems. Since I'm not interested so much in the problem of survival and reproduction of a bacterium in the soil, but rather the survival of our species, I have to convince nature to help solve these problems for me. Now, as you know, I hope, that all of this remarkable functionality of these natural molecules, which when constructed create these organisms, is encoded in DNA, which at first glance, with its 4 rather boring letters, may not look like much to you at all. But let me tell you, when you string these 4 fairly boring letters together in the right order, it makes an incredible music. And it's composing that music that I'm going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to tell you about writing new DNA, so-called synthetic biology, and our ability to manipulate and construct new DNA sequences has exploded in the last couple decades. I mean, if you remember, little more than 50 years ago, we learned for the first time what the structure of DNA was. It's only 50-some years ago. About 30 years ago, we as scientists figured out how to do genetic engineering, how to manipulate the DNA and insert it into organisms so that it could encode new functions. And in the last 10 years or so, we've been able to learn how to synthesize, how to actually chemically create DNA. So that today, imagine this, you can sit down at your computer and you can type in a sequence, essentially any sequence you want, and you can email that off to your favorite DNA supply house, say in Northern California, and in a few days, you will get back in your FedEx envelope the actual physical gene or set of genes. So you can write anything you want in this incredible code that is read by nature. So probably you saw this headline last year, about a year ago now, where not only did someone synthesize a gene, they synthesized an entire genome. That is, millions of base pairs assembled in the right sequence and inserted that into a cell whose genome had been removed. And that cell read that DNA, and the whole thing rebooted, so to speak. It went from being this protoplasm to now having the code that came from a different organism, slightly different organism, and it started reading that code and expressing the behaviors of that different organism. Now, it wasn't a very interesting organism. It was a mycoplasma. It's about as dull as an organism gets, because we're still at the very beginning of this. So it was a remarkable technical feat. Now, you wouldn't know this from the headlines, but what we didn't do, that is, this is Craig Venter's work from his research group, what they didn't do was write the sequence. They knew the sequence because that was in a database, and they could just copy it into this physical structure of DNA. They did not write the music, so to speak. This is what we don't know how to do. The music, the incredibly beautiful, complex, and intricate symphony that is life, the product of 4 billion years of evolution, we are barely holding a pencil when it comes to writing that music. We don't know how the DNA code creates a new behavior in an organism. The best we can do is copy what nature has already provided, resynthesize, and make a cell do something slightly different. So we don't know how to do that. But nature does. As opposed to any other engineering discipline created by man, we're now talking about engineering life. And there is an algorithm for the engineering of life that has worked for many billions of years, or at least 4 of them. And that's evolution, right? Evolution, the simple algorithm of mutation and natural selection, has created this vast array that you can enjoy all around you. And as far as I know, there was no input from the uber engineer. This was really an automatic algorithm once the thing was set in motion. Now, humans have been practicing this algorithm for a good long time in the form of something that you may all have in your house, an interesting house pet, which came about through artificial selection, breeding of wolves. And as you know, we don't do this so much as we did 100 years ago. Almost every farmer knew the effects of artificial selection. But you can breed organisms and create new, what we call phenotypes or behaviors of the way they look in just a few generations. Well, it so happens that that's a fairly slow process because the mechanisms for generating the diversity, right? These new behaviors come about because at the molecular level of the DNA, there's new changes being made. There's a new code being written by sex and by mutation. And the natural mechanisms for generating that diversity are fairly limited, right? You can have radiation, you can have chemical mutagens from the environment, spontaneous mutation rates, you can have sex. And when you have sex, it's pretty limited, right? It's limited by the encounter probability and then the molecular mechanisms. So it may be interesting, but you know, that's where you go. Well, now, with the genetic engineering capabilities and this DNA synthesis capabilities, we can now talk about doing all this without having to go through the fun part, so to speak. You can actually do this in the laboratory in the test tube. You can do the same manipulation that leads to artificial evolution in dog breeding. You can do that now in the laboratory, and now we can talk about monkeys breeding worms and, you know, you name it, you can do it. Most of it, of course, leads to complete garbage, right? That's why in the natural world, when you try to interbreed species, it usually leads to non-functional creatures. Well, in the laboratory, we can also make decisions about who breeds with whom and how. And so that's what I do over at Caltech. And the fun thing about this is that, you know, this is how we tweak the scientists, because if you're a biologist, you're always reverse engineering the natural world. A very small fraction of the potential molecules that you could make, the potential organisms you could make by manipulating DNA, a very teensy fraction of those are actually exhibited in the natural world, the ones that are biologically available in 2011. But if you think about everything that's physically possible, that doesn't break the laws of thermodynamics, and could possibly be made in the test tube, that's a space where there's the solution to the energy crisis. There's the cure for cancer there. There's just about everything. There's the whole story of your life there. But we have to find it. And that's the interesting part about artificial selection when you take away some of these constraints. So I'm interested in this space of physical possibilities. Now, this is not science fiction. I'm here because I'm a practicing scientist, and we do things. We make interesting new, right now, molecules this way. And I'm going to give you an example that's not my own work. In fact, it's a work of Roger Chen, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for making these molecules. And he took two proteins that you can extract from corals, and he bred them in the laboratory using the methods that I developed, and bred them into this incredible array of all different colored fluorescent proteins. And these became so important tools for molecular biology because you could label anything and visualize what's going on inside of a cell, that he won the Nobel Prize for this. In fact, you can now see that these molecules are used everywhere. They're also used for less compelling applications. For example, if you express these molecules in goldfish, you get glowfish. You can actually buy now different colored fluorescent goldfish, and you can make your mouse or your cat fluoresce because these are biologically expressed molecules. I mean, it is ridiculous, but this is science fact. We can do more useful things. For example, if we're interested in having our children live in a world where the standard of living even begins to approach the one that we've enjoyed, we have to learn how to live sustainably. And we have to learn how to utilize waste materials or renewable materials like plants to create the fuels and chemicals that we need. Only plants don't like to give up their goodies. You know, they're full of sugars, but they don't like to give it up. And biology is very good at extracting things from plants. So for example, they're proteins, beautiful proteins that will go in and chew up the polymers that make up plants, releasing the sugars so that microorganisms can convert those. And we do things like breeding those proteins. We find that their little sex improves their attitude quite a bit. You can make much better versions of these proteins by breeding them in the laboratory. Anybody who's had children see that you see a very nice distribution in the children. Some of them are even smarter than their parents. We see that at the level of molecules as well. These molecules we make in the laboratory are better at this job that a human asks them to do than any of the parents that they start with. And then you can tune them a little bit with a little bit of random mutation and artificial selection. And you can make things that work in highly non-natural environments so that we can go on and assemble these inside of a cell like a yeast, which we've been doing artificial breeding on for 10,000 years, right, to make ethanol, right? We drink ethanol because we know how to make it. For 10,000 years, we've been making ethanol. But now with these technologies, you can go and you can make, say, a whole new set of molecules that you could actually put into your gas tank or into the distribution system. So for example, we make these drop-in fuels by breeding organisms and making these molecules in the laboratory that convince them and reprogram them to make what we actually really need. And I really like this because one of my visions, this whole thing about engineering tonight is about visions, about having a dream and implementing that dream. Well, we've got capabilities for implementing dreams. And one dream that I'm going to share with you is that these little guys that make us sick right now, these E. coli that you're hearing about making people sick in Germany, for example, I'll put them to work. I'll put them to work to solve the problems that are facing us to have the fuels and chemicals of the future so that we can take what we have plenty of, sunlight. There's plenty of sunlight. We got plenty of garbage too. So we can take those things and convince these brilliant biological machines to convert those into products that would be good for humans and to do it in a renewable fashion. Once again, this isn't science fiction. These will be the factories of the 21st century, and they are starting right now to be put into place. So the timer here wasn't clear to me, so I want to make sure that I don't go over anymore. This is going to be made possible by us accepting our ignorance, that we don't know how to write from first principles, that DNA code. But if we use evolution as our friend, this simple algorithm, and we learn how to breed at the level of molecules, we can now go places where we couldn't imagine going before. So, I'll thank you. Now, I've been asked, oh yeah, why don't you do that while I've been asked to talk to you briefly, get back onto there. So I'm a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and I want to share with you something that, for which there's a brochure that I hope you'll all pick up. The National Academy of Engineering has a program called the Grand Challenges. And why did we do this? I mean, everybody knows what the problems of society are. But there are some particular challenges that we have identified. A big panel got together and identified a set of challenges to put forth to our entire society, to your children, to my children. Get these knuckleheads off the sofa and into the laboratory. And you people can do that. You people can help us advertise that there are problems really worth working on. Now, I teach young people at Caltech, and there is no one more motivated to work on society than someone who has a problem that they think they can solve. And there's not a happier person than one who's using his or her brain to do something meaningful and creative. You know that in your own business. So I'd like to share these challenges with you and help us advertise them. And there's actually a representative from the NA here tonight who can answer some of your questions about this. There is a website. So for example, what is a grand challenge? You can go to the website and see this, but here's LA. 70% of our population on this planet, which is growing, the population is growing, as you know, 70% in the next 20 years or so is going to be living in urban areas like Los Angeles. How are we going to supply the energy, the food, the information, the transportation for this burgeoning population that's going to grow much faster than the overall population of this planet? Because as people move from urban areas and from rural areas to urban areas, these problems are going to explode. And we here in LA are going to be right at the center of that. These are challenges, these and many others. How do you reverse engineer the brain? How are we going to understand how the brain functions so that we can engineer brain-like things? How are we going to deliver medicines in an intelligent way? How are we going to deliver pure water to the people who need it? These are truly the challenges that face our society, but ones for which technological solutions should and will exist. And they will exist if we can inspire the young people to do that. So the plea is to help us inspire young people by making engineering seem cool. Let me tell you, it is cool. Engineering is very cool, and it's a lot of fun. I have fun every single day because I get to see these incredible solutions to problems that nature invented. And I get to manipulate those and try to solve human problems that way. So please ask questions about the grand challenges. Go to the website. There's lots of information about what these challenges are, what the technical benefits and possibilities are. It's a great set of ideas for storytellers. Thank you.